Greetings YouTube, Kudo-kun here. It's been a while since I've done something MLP related, and I wanted to do set reviews, especially the new set that just came out, High Magic, but I'm actually a couple of sets behind, so I decided to skip that. Instead, I'd like to do a small evaluation of all the colors and where they're currently at. So we're going to look at 5 mains, 10 friends, 10 events, and 10 resources from each color, starting with purple. Now the idea of this video is to kind of show off some of Purple's strengths and give you some card ideas in case you're trying to build a purple deck of your own. Just a quick disclaimer, I don't play in high-level MLP tournaments or anything, so the meta might render some of the cards on my list obsolete, or there might be some cards good for the meta that I haven't included. But for the most part, this should be a great starting point if you're looking to build purple in MLP, or if you have a purple deck and you're looking for ways to improve it, or you're just looking for information on purple's strengths. Without further ado, here are my 5 favorite mains from purple. Discord Give or Take is a very powerful card, especially in its intended deck, the Chaotic Control. Its flip condition is relatively simple, especially if you're playing cards that let you manipulate the top card of your deck. If you play a friend, you can look at the top card of your deck, and if they have the same printed power, you can show it to your opponent and then flip this over. It's a very, very easy flip condition, and this is a really good card if you need a first turn flip. Most of Discord's cards have exactly 2 power, so if you're running a pure Discord deck, this is a great card to use as a main. When it's flipped, at the start of the score phase, you can pay 2 to give another character +3 or -3 until the end of the turn. There are a couple of great things about this. The first being it says character, so you can target your opponent's main character if you really need to. Because it happens during the score phase, you can also use it to manipulate solving problems. So if your opponent, for example, is trying to solve a 4-3, you can give one of their characters -3 and they're no longer solving that problem. This is great for decks, especially white and blue decks, that are trying to solve high-level problems as quickly as possible, and they're relying on one character to get all of the power for the color that they need. One thing purple is great at is stalling, and this is a very stall-heavy card, and also a very powerful card if you're using it to win face-offs. If your opponent can get the face-off off anyway, then you can put a gap of 3 power between yours and your opponent's team, regardless of who you're giving the power, taking the power away from. Another great thing about this card is you can use it to give your opponent -3, so that when you're confronting a problem, if you don't quite want to go into a face-off, then you can make it so that your opponent is no longer confronting the problem, and you can complete the problem without actually going into a face-off. Princess Luna Party's Over is next on our list. You can flip her when you win a face-off involving this card. Admittedly, a little more difficult to pull off than some of the other mains we're going to be looking at. The cool thing about this is it doesn't specify a problem face-off, so you can pull this off if you can be a troublemaker, or if you can get one of the events that lets you force a face-off. After you do boost it though, it gives a -1 to all of your opponent's characters during the problem face-offs. Keep in mind it says here, so if you're having a double face-off, it only affects the characters that Princess Luna is personally facing. This is really great for swarm decks in particular, so this is a great counter if you know that people are using yellow a lot, and I've also found that it's a great card to use against pink decks. Blue decks in particular are a big problem right now, and this is great against blue decks as well because they happen to piggyback a lot of characters onto a problem. Older players will recognize this effect from a character named Lady Justice that was released in base set. Yes, it's just as awesome, and it can't be removed from the field by effects, so there you go. We're going to look at another Princess Luna, Princess of the Night. When you confront this card's problem, you can pay 2 to flip this card over. It's not as difficult as the other one because you can kind of build around this. If you do the 1-1 problems, for example, then you can flip this by the 2nd or 3rd turn. When boosted, it has Studious, which admittedly isn't a great effect, but because it triggers off of every face-off, you can build around it. And during a face-off, you can discard an event to give this card +3 power until the end of the face-off. This is a very easy card to use, so if you're having trouble building a purple deck or knowing where to start, then this is probably my most recommended starter for you, because you can manipulate your deck to pretty much give you enough events to just always be able to win your face-offs. Now, this is kind of a cheesy strategy, and putting all your eggs in one basket like this is normally pretty bad. Like, there are a lot of ways in today's metagame that can get rid of Princess Luna, so it's not quite as good as people give it credit for, but at the same time, it's still a really great effect, so it's something to look forward to. This deck is especially deadly if you pair it with pink, because pink has a lot of draw power, a lot of really great draw power, mind you, and you can just play with a full hand every turn and just flush it out and destroy your opponent in every single face-off. Oh man, Twilight Sparkle Friendship is Magic's boosted side is flipped, so that's how you know it's a good card. So its flip condition is relatively simple. If you have a friend in play, then you play a friend of a different color than that friend and you flip this card over. Once it's flipped, you can give this character an extra color depending on how many opponents you're facing. In most cases, it's going to be one extra color. I really like this card mainly because it makes 3-color decks a little more viable. Let's say you want to run something super crazy like a purple, orange, yellow deck. So you play a purple card, and then you play a yellow card, and then you can have this turn into orange to make your higher level orange cards a lot more plausible. Meeting color requirements is one of the biggest reasons that 3-color decks don't seem to do anything. So if you can have this be another color to make up for the color that you're lacking in, then you can play really high color requirement characters at little to no effort. You can also do something really cheesy in like flipping this card back to its start side and then reboosting it over and over again to get even more colors, but it's too much work, okay? Just think of this as a viable way to run a 3-color deck if a 3-color deck is what you're looking to play. The last moon we're going to look at is another Twilight Sparkle, and this is actually Faithful Student. Longtime players are going to recognize this as the very first Twilight Sparkle main that we got. Oddly enough, some people are going to say this is a controversial pick, but I still think it's probably one of the best purple mains that we have available to us right now. It's definitely on the bottom of the list when I'm making a top 5 like this, but at the same time, it has Studious, which is a decent effect. It's got, when you win a face-off, you can turn this card over, which is kind of a difficult flip request to have, but at the same time, it's very manageable because of all the different kinds of face-offs we have. And it's got some neat little looping potential, because after a face-off involving this card, you can put any events that you flipped into your hand instead of putting them on the bottom of your deck. So playing around this, you can actually fill up your hand with really useful events instead of having to put them on the bottom of your deck. I want you guys to keep in mind that we now have very reliable ways to flip way more than one card during a face-off. So if you're flipping 2, 3, 4 cards during a face-off and you're getting a lot of events, then you're going to have a very full hand for the entire game. This is also part of a cheap little strategy that I'll talk about a bit later when we get to the events. For now, we're going to look at some friends. Princess Luna Web of Dreams is one of the more recent friends that we've gotten, and she's a real game changer. Firstly, she has Meticulous, which is kind of like the reverse of what White has, so we can look the top card of our deck and you can put it either on the top or the bottom. Since it happens at the start of your turn, you can sort of manipulate what card you want to draw from the top of your deck. You don't get full control, but if you look at the top card of your deck and it's not a card you want, you can just put it straight on the bottom. And every time you play an event, you can pay 1 to put a 2-power Figment Friend token into play. This is really cool. Purple has this thing now where you can play all of these sort of like imaginary creatures to the board. And I think purple has the potential to be one of the most powerful colors if somebody can figure out how to do this in a smart way. In today's metagame, color requirements are almost a joke, so if you're building a problem deck around this kind of effect, then you can actually make it so that you can just complete all the problems on the board with these 2/2 figments, and there's not a whole lot your opponent can do about it. They're permanent friends when you put them in play. It's not like they're going to go away at the end of the turn or anything, and paying 1 for 2 power is already in itself pretty good. The other cool thing about this is if you happen to have more than one Princess Luna in play, then they all trigger off of playing the same card. So if you happen to play like a 0-cost event, for example, then you can pay 1, get a 2 Fragment Friend in play, and then if you happen to have more than one Princess Luna, then you can just pay 1 for each one you have and just keep multiplying your power. Pay 1 for 2, pay 2 for 4, or pay 3 for 6. Action Point Acceleration decks should have a field day with this idea. Zocor is a pretty high-level card, so it has an immediate effect where you can banish this card from your hand to reduce the requirements of your cards by 2 purple, which makes a lot of purple cards actually immediately playable. This makes this card never really dead in your hand unless you are full of purple. This card is especially good if you are running purple as your secondary color, because anytime you get a Zocor in your hand, if you're playing friends with a 2 or lower purple requirement, then you can get those purple cards in play without paying their color requirements, and then for the rest of the game you have the purple requirements because you have a purple friend in play now. If you happen to not use it for that effect, then you can still pay 3 to put 3 power onto a problem, and your opponent's main character can't contribute their power to face-offs. There are a lot of decks that revolve around having their main character win face-offs for them, so this is a very, very important effect. You are paying 3 to give yourself +3 power, and then potentially take 3 power away from your opponent, putting a 6 power gap in between you and your opponent for 3. If you can get one of these on each problem, then you can potentially create a lockdown for your opponent that they don't want to deal with. Brightbulb's one of the OG staples, and he remains a pretty decent card. When you put him in play at a problem, then anytime your opponent tries to play a character from their hands to that card's problem, then you can just tap this and move it. Most of the time, it's just going to move home, but you can also move it to the other problem if there's something really shenanigansy that you need to do. It is 3 costs for 2 powers, so you're not paying for yourself in power, but this is still a really dangerous card that your opponent has to play around, because as soon as they play a friend, they know that it's going to get moved with Brightbulb, so they either have to play a mind game where they play a weaker character first, or they have to play their strong character, have it be moved home, and then pay 2 more to actually move it. Either way, Brightbulb remains one of the more disruptive cards that you can play, and the fact that it doesn't have any color requirements makes it even better. Arkhat Garde is a pretty unique card, so you can retire this card to move all other characters at its problem home, and characters can't be moved or played to that problem for the rest of the turn. He's kind of like a bomb. If your opponent is just rushing a bunch of characters onto a problem, then you can pay 2 to play Arkhat Garde, and then just have him explode and send all of your opponent's friends home. This is especially useful if you're playing a Troublemaker control deck, because if your opponent plays all the characters they need to confront a Troublemaker next turn, then you can play Counterlock Arkhat Garde, and then he explodes, sending all of them home, and your Troublemaker or villain continues to wreak havoc on your opponent, whatever it may be. Yellow Parasprite's good, and so is Pink Parasprite. Getting some more Princess Luna in here, we have Wax and Wane. When this card enters play, you gain 1, so it's almost like paying 2 for 3 power. And when an opposing friend enters play here, you can banish this card, and then play it again at the start of your next turn, and you get another 1. So if your opponent keeps doing this, you can potentially just rush yourself through the action points, and eventually Princess Luna will just pay herself off, and you will have made action points off of her and still get to keep the 3 power. The effect is optional, so if you're getting ready for a face-off or something, you don't have to do this. She can just be 3 for 3 power, and the fact that you have the option is really good. You can also play around this, like if you don't want to actually do a face-off with your opponent, then you can just remove her, not confront the problem in the beginning of your turn, get the 1 action point, and then just keep doing this every time your opponent plays a character there. The other thing about this that's really cool is when it leaves play and then comes back into play, it doesn't say that it has to come back into play where it was before, so you could potentially just play it anywhere, so it's almost like a free move if you think about it. This is especially useful if your opponent is going to start a face-off. You can get rid of Princess Luna, lose the face-off or win the face-off, whatever happens, but everybody moves home, and then at the start of your next turn, put her back in play at a problem, and boom, you don't even have to pay 2 to move her to the problem. She's not taking up any space at home. She's just an overall good card, especially if you can get multiple of these in play. Springboard continues to be a beast. It is one of the most powerful cards, I would say, in purple, remaining to this day, and it's only a rare. First of all, it has Studious, so you can potentially make action points off of this card, and second, it gets +2 power for each of your opponent's characters at its problem. And because it's character, it also includes their main. It can get so big, you have no idea. Every one of your opponent's friends at the problem gives her another 2. So if your opponent has any friends with 2 or less in play, then you're actually not only keeping up with them, but getting more than them. You can put Springboard by herself onto a problem and just have her completely wreck. Like if you play this on your opponent's problem, and your opponent is already solving that problem, then you could potentially solve it with Springboard by herself, go into a face-off, and then win the face-off, all with that 3 action point 1 pony. I feel like I really don't even need to talk about this card. It's really good. It's probably always going to be really good. First, Vanquishers is a personal favorite of mine. During the main phase, if this card's got a problem, then you can exhaust it and put it in your hands to move 2 of your opponent's characters home. This is cool for a couple of reasons. The first being, it doesn't specify that it has to be the same problem, so you can take 2 from the other problem if you really want to and move them home. or you can just take one from each. It's got a lot of really good versatility. If you don't want to do that, then you're paying 3 for 4 power, which is really good, and it also has Studious, so you can potentially make another point off of it, so it's like 2 for 4 power in some situations. Overall, it's just really good, and it's not even like you have to use its effect right when it's played, so you can just play it as a 3 for 4, and then at any point just go, no, I can't have that, and then put it right back in your hand, move some friends home, and then pay the 3 to play it again if you really want to. Spike is a really important card if you are building a deck around events, such as the Princess Luna discarding event to get +3 that we were talking about earlier. Every turn you can exhaust this and then put an event from your discard pile into the banished area. And then pretty much during any of your main phases that you want to, you can banish this card and put all those events back into your hand. This is a really fantastic card. It's really, really good, and I'd say probably a staple right now. Let's say, hypothetically, worst case scenario, you only get its effect off once. You pay 2 to put 2 power in play, and you decide, exhaust this card, banish an event from your discard pile, like your best event, and then you just banish this card and immediately get that event back. It's 2 to get an event back from your discard pile. And that's if you're not willing to wait and let this build up over a few turns and get even more events off of the effect. Really no downside whatsoever, other than the fact that it's a super rare and probably kind of hard to get a hold of right now. Time Will Tell Minuet is an important card for current day purple decks that are revolving around the every time you put a card from your hand on top of your deck. It's really cool. So you can exhaust this card, pay 1 to draw 2 cards, and then you can take any card you want to from your hand and put it on top of your deck. This has so many uses. Where do I even begin? First of all, 1 to draw into 2 cards, and all you have to give up is 1 card that you don't even need right now. That's really cool. It's not even like you lose it forever. You just gotta wait a turn and draw into it, or you can even pay 1 action point to redraw into the card that you put back on top of your deck. It's 2 for 2 power. It's only got 1 purple requirement, so if you have a purple main, you can play this almost immediately. Everything about this card is great. And all that's even before you factor in that you can use it in today's purple decks to proc all of the return a card to the top of your deck and you gain this effect. Last friend we'll look at is an old classic, Lady Justice. Yeah, Lady Justice has still got it. It's 4 for 3 power, and it doesn't have any color requirements, so you can splash this into any deck that you feel like. During face-offs, all of your opponent's characters at this card's problem get -1 power. This card is so important. First of all, you have this really nice event that starts a face-off, and it counts for that one too. So you can use Lady Justice to pull that event off over and over again and just win all of the face-offs all the time. Obviously, you have your problem face-offs that it also wins, and even better, this is a really important card for Troublemaker control decks right now because it counts for Troublemaker face-offs as well. So if you're running some kind of villain or some kind of Troublemaker that you need to keep in play in order to win, then you can just make it almost impossible for your opponent to complete that objective of beating that Troublemaker and then continuing on to the actual problem card. Next up, let's look at some events. Hasty Retreat is pretty decent removal. It costs 2, and you can put an opposing friends from the face-off on top of the deck. This is important for a couple of reasons. First of all, if it's near the start of the face-off, then what's going to happen is you're going to put it on top of their deck, and they're going to flip it for the face-off, and then put it on the bottom of the deck. Not only is it a friend that's going to the bottom of their deck, so they won't be drawing into it again for a while, but if you're taking a pretty weak character and putting on top of their deck, then you can make sure that they're not flipping something good for their face-off flip. Most cards in purple can get rid of a friend or a character for 1, so having to pay 2 is kind of a downside, but because you have the versatility of controlling what your opponent's going to flip for the face-off and also getting rid of the character by putting it on the bottom of the deck, I think it's worth the extra action point. Fantazmo continues off of the Princess Luna, so you can put an opposing friend on top of the owner's deck. This has all the bonuses that I was just talking about, except it doesn't happen during a face-off, making it a little bit weaker. You have to plan this card out way better, and you get a 2-power Figment Friend token in play. The potential of this card is pretty amazing. So you pay 3, and you get rid of one of your opponent's friends. Let's say theirs has 3 power. So it's 3 to get rid of 3 power on the board, and then add +2 power to your side of the field. And the token that comes into play can come into play anywhere, so you can choose to play it on the other problem if you really need to, and because it's purple, it helps solve problems. This card just does too many good things at too good of a cost to ignore. Star Swirl Research is an interesting card. First of all, I'm going to say now that I think this is a very important card for purple decks to have right now, because when you play it, you put it on top of your deck, and it pretty much guarantees you 7 power when you flip a card. This is important for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's an immediate, so there's no direct timing to when you can play this card. You can play it right at the end of the actual, playing cards during the face-off step and right before you flip, so that you can guarantee this card goes off without your opponent interfering unless they have some kind of card to counter this with. The other thing that makes this card important is the fact that we have that Twilight Sparkle from base set that I was talking about earlier. While that Twilight Sparkle might technically be the weakest of the 5 cards I was talking about, it's got a very important loop that I don't see anybody taking advantage of right now. You can have that Twilight Sparkle in play, and then play Star Swirl Research, put it on top of your deck, and then flip it for the face-off so that you get the 7, and then because of Twilight's effect, this goes right back in your hands, and it's free. Can you imagine how powerful that is? You play it, you guarantee yourself 7 when you flip for the face-off, and then you put it right back in your hands to play in every single face-off for the rest of the game. So good, so much potential, and if you partner that with the fact that we have the Princess Luna who can play 1 to put the 2/2 Figments in play, sorry, I say 2/2, I mean just 2 power purple Figments in play, then you pay 0, you get yourself 7, and then, it's just so good. 0, and then you pay 1 to get the 2 power in play, and then you get the 7 off of this, and then Twilight Sparkle puts it right back in your hands. This card has a lot of potential. Please, everybody, start looking into it more. I think it's a 2 of to 3 of, and it's really good. Cutie Scare is probably one of the best removals that we have right now. It's a reaction, so you can use it during your opponent's turn, and after the start of the score phase, you can move all characters at a problem home. This can potentially stop your opponent from scoring a whole bunch of points, and if they're really riding everything on solving a problem, then you can just really put them in a tight spot by moving everybody home, because by that point it's too late to move them back, and even if it does come back around to their turn, that is a lot of action points they have to spend putting their characters back. Even if they could move their characters through some kind of weird gimmicky effect, that's something that they have to do all over again. At 3 cost, if you're moving at least 3 characters, then this card is definitely worth it. Definitely something you should be splashing 1 in of at least. I'm also going to throw out again that this is a great card for Troublemaker control decks, because if your opponent is getting ready to beat a Troublemaker, then you play this card and move everybody home, and all of a sudden they're not prepared to fight that Troublemaker during their next Troublemaker phase. Through the Ages is a neat new card that we got. It's an immediate, so it's pretty much just like a reaction. Opposing characters involved in a face-off here have -1 power, and it only costs 1. So you're getting a lot of potential pluses off of this card. You pay 1, and even if your opponent only has 1 character on the field, paying 1 to put a 1 power gap between you and your opponent is pretty awesome. Also, I know I sound like a broken record, but it doesn't specify what kind of face-off, so you can use this to help out your Troublemaker control decks. You can use it to get that the magic event off. Just everything about this card is really good, and at 1 cost, it's probably one of the better purple cards to be running for any kind of control deck right now. There are a couple of teleport cards. Mist Teleport, I'd say, is more important right now. After an opposing friend enters play, move it. It can go into play anywhere. It's kind of like having a bright bulb on standby all the time. That color requirement hurts, but if you happen to have the cards you need for the color requirement, then it's a really good just, screw up your opponent's plans thing, because if you're playing in a more serious setting, everybody's going to be counting down their action points to the T. So if you make your opponent have to factor in that they're going to have to pay 2 more action points to move a character that they play, then it's going to throw a huge wrench in their gears, because it's another action that they don't get during that turn. One other thing, if you're playing something called a Toll Booth deck, which involves white and making your opponent pay extra to move characters to problems, then this is just an invaluable card that you need to run at least 2 of. Private Journal has a couple of very important uses. First of all, you can pay to look at your opponent's hand, and looking at your opponent's hand is very important, especially if your opponent has at least 5 cards in their hand. This lets you know exactly what your opponent is planning, what their next strategy is probably going to be, what the next card they're probably going to play is. It warns you about any traps that they have in their hand, like events and stuff. And because you can take one card and put it on top of their deck, this has the same bonuses as the card we looked at before. So you take their best card and you put it on top, and then they flip into it for the face-off, and then they lose it because it goes to the bottom of their deck. Or you can even take something that's, kind of decent and put it on top, and that's not a card that's available for the face-off. Either way, you get to look at your opponent's hand, you get to get rid of one card from your opponent's hand, and the card is going to be gone for a very long time because it's going to the bottom of their deck. For 2 costs, this is a very good card. Spell Off is the card I've been talking about. It's a showdown card, and it's one of the really good ones where you can start a face-off between 2 sides instead of just 2 characters, and one of the characters is yours and the other one has higher power than yours. It's just 2 sides facing off against each other. Your Lady Justice's proc, your main character procs if you're playing the Princess Luna party is over. And its win is really good too. The winner of the face-off can move each opposing character involved in the face-off home. So if you've got a pretty good side going and your opponent is going to challenge you in a face-off or something, or even if you don't have a very good side going but you have enough to confront the problem, I guess, then you can just use this card, send all of your opponent's characters home, have all of your face-off effects proc, so your Studious's proc, and you just get a fresh field, you can confront your problem, and your opponent has to pay to move everybody back. This is another really good card if you're looking at a Toll Booth deck that's purple and white combined with a lot of showy cards, and overall just a decent card in general. The Epiphany cards are really good, this is no exception. During your main phase you can play this for 2, and you can use 2 of these effects, and the effects are pretty awesome. One is moving a character, which you're probably going to end up doing because, that's an awesome effect. One is opponents can't move their characters this turn. That would be really good if you could play main phase cards during your opponent's turn, like reactions, but you can't, and then draw 3 cards. So chances are what you're going to do is you're going to move an opposing character home and you're going to draw 3 cards, and for 2 that's pretty awesome. That's getting the effect of back where you began, and also getting 3 cards off of it by paying 1 more action point. This card is invaluable if you're running the Princess Luna that discards event cards, because even if you choose not to use it for that, then you can still discard it for the 3 powers, so really there's no downside to having this in your hand at all. My last event here is going to be Ponyville Emergency. Ponyville Emergency is a main phase card, move 2 opposing characters. You can move them anywhere you want to, from anywhere you want to. It's got a lot of control. If you want to start up a face-off, then you can take 2 of your opponent's characters from home, move them to a problem, or you can take 2 characters of problems, move them home to make the field a little more clear. Everything about this card is really good, especially for just 2 action points. I'd personally say that this is going to be the new back where you began. It's got a pretty low color requirement, and you get to move 2 characters instead of 1. Pretty much the same effect, but you're getting more off of it in the long run, because if you're running 3 of these, then it's a potential 6 move, and if you're running 3 back where you began, then it's only a potential 3. So you can debate amongst yourselves whether or not this is actually going to be better than back where you began, but I think it is. Next, we move on to our final category, resources. I'll start off by saying that purple doesn't really have decent resources, but it's got a couple of things. The first one being Fighting for Friendship, one of the base set cards. You play it on a problem, and your characters with that problem get +1 power during face-offs. This is mainly good if you're running some kind of purple-blue or purple-yellow deck, or a purple-blue-yellow deck if you dare dream. And if you are playing a card like this, which costs 2, then all you have to do is have it on a problem where you have at least 2 characters and you're getting your action points back in power. And if you happen to have 3 or more, then you're actually getting more than your action points back in power. It does kind of stink that if the problem goes away, then so does this, but overall, it's a pretty decent card for only costing 2. Counterlot Archives is a kind of difficult card to play around. It costs 2, you play it to your home, and pretty much every turn you can exhaust this and put an event from your hands to beneath this card. and then at the start of a face-off, you can exhaust this to put one of those cards that you banished under it on top of your deck, and then get 1 action point. Chances are you're going to have at least 2 face-offs during a match, so once that happens, this card will actually have paid itself off because you're getting so many action points, and the ability to control which event is on top of your deck is really crucial because events have the highest printed power in the game. So if you have something with like 6 power under this at all times, then pretty much at any point you can just put it on top of your deck and guarantee that you're going to have the 6 power during a face-off. And don't forget, if you're running the base set OG Twilight Sparkle, then the card that you reveal is going to go right back in your hand, and you can put it right back under this card during your next turn. Dream Network. At the start of your turn, you can reveal the top card of your deck, and if you do, and it's an event, then you can pay 1 to put a 2-power Figment Friend into play. There's just more Figment tokens, just all the 2s all day. It only costs 1, just like Princess Luna's effect. And if you are running purple, you're probably going to have plenty of events to reveal for this effect. Focus Study is a really good anti-meta card right now. Opponents can't play friends with 2 power or less to this card's problem. It's just really good anti-meta right now. Like, it's always going to be good against yellow. It's not so good against, like, orange or probably white, but it's really good against yellow, maybe purple, and it's always just going to be a really decent staple card if you happen to play it in the right meta. And yeah, I mean, it's one card that can shut down a lot of decks, especially if you're running something like a Troublemaker control deck. Since the problems aren't going to be flipping, then you can have a Focus Study in play all game and just stop like half of your opponent's hand. Remember, if your opponent can't get those small characters into play, then they can't meet color requirements and they can't use the really good cards in their deck because they can't get the really small guys out there. Obviously, the play around this is just playing characters to their home or playing them on the other problem, but if you're controlling what your opponent is allowed to play and where they're allowed to play it, then you're in control of the game. I just can't decide whether you should live or die. Boy, you probably go to heaven. Please, I'm sorry. So if you play this on a problem, then you can exhaust this and pay 1 to move an opponent's character away from that problem, either to the other problem or back home. This is pretty much a permanent back where you began. People were arguing for a long time whether or not this card was better. I think it is better, especially right now, because purple is just so stally. It is getting a little more aggressive, but mainly it's about stalling. You pay 1, you keep this on a problem, and you can just whoosh away your opponent's characters every turn, and they have to pay to move them back. This card, again, is just godlike when it comes to toll booth decks. My heart feels dead inside, it's cold and hard and... I'm sorry, I'm still on the kick. So Tempting Offer is probably the best card that chaotic decks have right now. You pay 1, you play it to your home, it doesn't go to a problem, it goes straight to your home, so it stays in play longer. And whenever you flip a chaotic card, you can move an opposing character involved in the face-off just away. Move them back home, move them to the other problem if you really want to for some reason. But this card is pretty much the reason that Chaos decks can even function as a whole. If you've looked at chaotic cards before and you've always wanted to sort of, test around a deck around them, having 3 of these is essential, especially if you have all 3 of them in play at once and you flip over 1 chaotic card, you can just move 3 characters straight out of the face-off and win the face-off. I'd also like to put extra emphasis on the fact that it says an opposing character, so yes, you can use this to move your opponent's main out of the fight. Cutie Mark Molt is another asset. You play it to your home, and when you put a card back on top of your deck through some kind of effect, then you can exhaust this and put a Cutie Mark counter on this. And then when you're ready to get rid of it during your main phase, you can retire this and get rid of all of the Cutie Mark counters on it, and you get 1 action point for each Cutie Mark counter that you remove. Card, very important right now for the meta. Very crucial to have this at 1 in all decks, that I would say, personally. Because people are running blue decks with Rainbow Dash. Can't remember the name of it. It's a card that I hate that starts resetting everybody's counters. I'll have to look that up in a second. On even ground, guys. I remembered as soon as I paused the recording. It's on even ground. With cards like that running right now, and even if that card wasn't running around, this would still be a really good card, because it's just every turn you have a potential to get a whole bunch of Cutie Mark counters on this card if you're running a deck around it. You play Zecora, You play just all kinds of cards to put cards back on top of your deck, and this card just goes off and gets you a whole bunch of action points, and it only costs 1. I'd argue that if you're playing a modern day version of purple, this card is essential to have at 3. You have to have it at 3. It's impossible to run the deck if you don't have this at 3. Another thing that I just thought of, if you're playing the card from before that costs 0, and you put it on top of your deck so that you can flip it and it gets 7, that is a free card. You play it for free, and then it just turns into action points during your next turn if you want to get rid of this. This card is so explosive. Just everybody look at this card, marvel in its just absolute beauty, and run it in at 3 if you're running a modern day purple deck. I'd say it's less important if you're not running a modern day purple deck and you're running something like some sort of really old purple strategy like Toll Booth, for example, or Troublemaker Control, then it's not as important. But if you're running one of the modern day purple decks that just controls the top card of your deck over and over, then this is absolutely essential and you need it for your deck at 3. We finally hit an accessory. So you play this on a friend, and when you play an event, the friend gets +2 power until the end of the turn. This is a pretty obvious card to throw into purple. You play it on a friend, and it's 2, so as soon as you play that very first event, then this pays for itself in power for the turn. It's a resource that's worth 5 if you happen to flip it over for a face-off or something, which is pretty rare. I wouldn't say this is a necessary card, but if you're running a deck that needs accessories, then this is a pretty decent accessory to run. The fact that the power bonus is just 1 turn makes it way lower on the totem pole, but you know, it is a purple accessory that has a decent effect, so it is something we needed to look at. Man, we hit another studying card. Oh my gosh, Twilight Sparkle is a nerd. So you play this to your home, and opposing friends interplay Exhausted. This is a really cool card. I feel like this could be a potential 1 to 2 of tech in just about every deck. The only problem I see being that orange decks are kind of relevant right now because they're really good. So, study session, yeah? You play it to your home, and opposing friends interplay Exhausted. Doesn't matter where they come into play. You don't play this to a problem. It's just so good. Like I said before, purple is all about that stall. So if your opponent is playing their friends from their hand Exhausted, then that is a huge problem for them because exhausted friends can't solve problems. Even if they have everything they need to solve a problem or do a face-off or whatever it is they want to do, they can't do it because they have to wait 1 turn before they actually start doing anything. Another cool thing about this is if you happen to play something that removes one of your opponent's friends from play and then replays it, then it comes back into play exhausted because they are technically entering play. So just a fun little tech to keep in mind. If you're at a venue that doesn't run a lot of orange because there's not a lot of people picking up Applejack for whatever reason, then I would say try running this card in at least 1 in all of your purple decks because it will do wonders. Finally, we hit Utterly Drained, and Utterly Drained is about how I'm feeling right now. Oh man, it's been a while. So you play on an opponent's main character, and that main character, if it's boosted, has no abilities and cannot have any abilities. Talk about some anti-meta stuff right there. For 2 action points, your opponent's main character no longer has an effect. A lot of decks right now are based on main characters having decent effects, so this takes one of the major strengths of their deck just away. Just 2 action points for your opponent's main deck strategy to not work anymore. I'd say this card probably isn't as important as it would have been like 2 sets ago, but it is still a very great card to tech in. It's something that you really need to look at if there are certain deck types giving you trouble. Another neat thing about this card is if you happen to play it on an opponent's main while it's not boosted, then as soon as it does boost, then you get this effect off. So if your opponent is playing something like, say, a Queen Chrysalis, and they're just waiting a really long time to pull their effect off, you put an Utterly Drained on it, and even if they do boost it to the other side, then it loses its effect because as soon as it flips, it becomes boosted and then loses its effect before its effect actually takes place. So yeah, just a great anti-meta card to look at if there are certain deck types giving you trouble right now. Oh, that was rough, guys. My voice is killing me after that. I've really got to stop taking these long breaks. So overall, if you're looking to get into purple, I hope that I've given you a couple of tips, a couple of interesting ideas for how you want to go about your purple. Right now, purple is actually playing a lot more aggressively than it did back in the day, but it's still all about that control. It's probably got some of the best movement in the game still. It's got really good field control, and now that you have the Figment tokens, it can actually still be pretty impressive when it comes to actually getting a field out there. Another neat thing about the Figment tokens is the fact that they cost 1, so this deck isn't so much locked down by having your action points drained by uneven ground or by yellow decks. The resources are kind of garbage, but there are 1 or 2 that should help you out. The events are obviously where it's at when it comes to purple. Cards that let you control your events, getting your events, putting more events in your hand are the cards that you mainly want to focus on, and just having a lot more events in other decks is going to be the most beneficial thing for you. Another neat thing about purple is I'd say it's got some of the best variety of any color. I'd say that blue probably has a little bit more variety than this, but it's definitely up there when it comes to variety in decks. You could run a Troublemaker control deck, which works really, really well right now. You can run a pure control deck, you can run Toll Booth, you can run a really aggressive Princess Luna deck where you're just constantly getting action points to spend on Figments. The deck has a lot of possibilities right now, and it splashes really well with pretty much every color. I'd say that purple-white would probably be my favorite combination. You can also move it into purple-blue if you're running something a little more focused on either scare tactics or, obviously, the Troublemaker control. Deck's not running too well right now with yellow splashes or orange splashes, oddly enough. You'd think orange would go with anything, but it's just not really working out that well. Purple-pink is also really good. I'd say it's definitely a lot better than like purple-orange or purple-yellow. But the thing is, now that purple just has such insane field control and also the aggressive element with the Figment tokens, it's a little bit more unnecessary, I'd say, because you don't need the control that purple and pink brings. You can basically just run purple, control the field, and bring out the Figment tokens and have something a little more aggressive under you. Then again, these are just all my thoughts, guys, so please leave me your thoughts on the set in the comments section below. If you happen to be a high-level MLP player and you want to correct anything I've said, any of the card rulings, or tell me a bit more about the current metagame, then please leave that in the comments section below too. This is all about everybody learning together, so the more information you can provide, the better. Please leave this video a like, those things really do help us out. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudo news. Hopefully I'll have the other 5 colors out sometime in this lifetime. Next color I'm running is yellow, and it should be a lot of fun. So I'll catch you there.